I will now give the floor to Ms. Aya Chebbi. You have the floor now.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the United Nations Security Council, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for the opportunity to brief the UN Security Council on this important theme on peace and security in Africa, particularly to inform on the contribution of African youth and strategies to mobilize the UN family towards silencing the guns in Africa. I want to express my gratitude to the Republic of South Africa for this invitation and for your leadership on youth agenda. I want to also thank the African Union Silencing the Guns Unit, the Youth for Peace program of the Peace and Security Department, whom I work with closely, mobilizing the promotion and sustainable peace in Africa, but also the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa and the AU Permanent Representative to the UN for their continuous support and advocacy for all youth agenda. Please allow me to also congratulate all new members of the Council, and in particular the AU member states, the Republic of Niger and Republic of Tunisia, for being elected as non-permanent members, and also congratulate Tunisia for organizing early presidential election following the death of President Beji Qaid Sebsi. Young Tunisians said their word at the ballot box using their power of voting. They campaigned with zero budget and chose two candidates out of the norms. The process, however, remains fragile and very challenging, and we need to equip these young people and support innovation in our political processes. Excellencies, in my presentation, I'm going to address four main questions. What are the core issues we need to reflect on? What is the reality on the ground in Africa? What are we doing about it at the AU? And what can we do together? In 2013, my cousin was recruited by Daesh at the age of 22. At the time, he just graduated from university with an engineering degree, and it was a tough experience to go through in the family, which made me think, why young people like my cousin choose this path while I have chosen nonviolent activism, even though we both come from a similar educational and social background. That led me to do my thesis on youth recruitment to violent extremism, a comparative between Kenya and Tunisia. And together with my 8 years of Pan-African activism and my work as the AU Youth Envoy since last November, I want to offer the Council four main reflections on this topic today. First and foremost, this is a question of narrative. Unfortunately, when African youth get the worst leaders' attention, they are talked about as perpetrators of violence, with images carrying the guns, as the dangerous class, as the number of the unemployed, as migrants dying in the Mediterranean, and as a youth bulge. But they are not spoken about as a generation of peace builders that changed the course of history, that revolutionized technology, that inspired new ways of citizen engagement. African youth do not resign themselves to the hardships of their situation. They are using their agency and creativity to build the Africa we want. There is a danger of the victimization narrative. It is disempowering, and it overlooks youth agency. Many young people have internalized the idea that they are marginalized and now see these violent groups as legitimate fighters, not perpetrators of violence. So we have to value our youth and their contribution to society. They will look for recognition elsewhere if we don't. Therefore, our definition of demographic dividend should be about peace dividend. Youth as a human capital, the talent, and the driving force of our continent. We must change the narrative about African youth to become a narrative of collective, positive actor among the most informed, the most resilient generation in Africa, and if you don't disagree, Your Excellency, the coolest generation. The narrative question is also gendered because gender stereotypes are reinforced and young women's voices and unique experiences go often unrecognized. In this question, we must also recognize that since 2010, waves of youth-led peaceful change has swept our continent, demanding legitimate rights peacefully and creatively. We must see this movement's uprising and activism in Tunisia, Senegal, Zimbabwe, Gambia, Burkina Faso, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Sudan, Algeria, and many other countries as an opportunity to channel that energy in positive social change and peace building. I come from that generation. that started the first 21st century revolutions. We stood up for our rights and not only demanded but led change. We moved from being perceived as subjects to active citizens and change makers. And I'm here with you today as a testimony of deserving generation to be at the table. The second question is about hustling. We have a generation trapped in the state of waithood, waiting for adulthood, because they are in a constant negotiation to find their political and financial freedom. It's about the livelihoods of our young people who are barely surviving and who do not understand the contradiction of our times to be the youngest population in the world, 65% under 30, and yet the most marginalized and the most insecure. Young people are hustling, ticking a young women empowerment box here and a youth participation box there, with a lack of resources, support, and huge challenge with bureaucracy and limited documentation of their work. They hustle to sustain their impact from annual membership dues, training costs, and in-kind contribution. They hustle for funding as civil society. They hustle to collaborate with institutions and governments. They hustle to participate in peace processes, and they hustle for representation. But the real hustle, Excellencies, should be to make sure that we silence the guns by 2020. The third question is about identity and belonging. We want youth to give up the guns, but can we answer the big question in the mind of a 19 or 20-year-old? Who am I? What are we offering them? Can we give direction and assurance that we will provide all the enabling environment needed for our youth to thrive? The big question of identity, which we do not often talk about and only focus on temporary responsive measures to fix conflict, is crucial. Our efforts are informed by our multi-layered sense of identity: young, female, indigenous, refugee, migrant, with disability, living in post-colonial Africa, and so on and so forth. We need to promote a Pan-African, transnational identity and global citizenship. When you think Pan-African and global, it offers a place of belonging. It allows the imagination of the individual and the community, and of the Africa we want, which is borderless, transnational, multilingual, and multicultural community. Our Pan-African policies at the African Union are creating dynamism through the African Continental Free Trade Area, intra-trade, open borders, African passport, and Pan-African universities. The only way to end violence in our continent is to unite our youth around a Pan-African vision and space of exchange, knowledge, and solidarity. Even our education should instill pride and empower the African child in their African identity to combat xenophobia, hate, and exclusion. And we must not forget that there is no Pan-Africanism without feminism. The fourth and last reflection, we need to reflect on the nexuses with peace and security agenda. We have a trendy word in the youth space called intersectionality. Everything for us is intersectional. Our analysis, our challenges, our fluid identities, and therefore our solution must be intersectional. There is a nexus with development. It is not only a smart idea to increase investment in youth development, it is strategic. There is a nexus with governance. We should deliver the health, education, and services that our citizens and youth deserve, because where there is an absence of these services, violent groups become economic and political and social actors. There is a nexus with inequality, because jobs alone do not address deep-seated awareness and lived experiences of injustice for youth, who then look upon, again, violent groups as legitimate fighters. The future of work needs to be about dignity, because young people don't just want jobs, they want jobs with dignity. There is a nexus with climate change. In the words of the African Union Commission chairperson, His Excellency Moussa Faki, the effects of climate change in the Sahel has become a threat to peace and security, not only in the region, but also worldwide. There is a nexus with health and disease. Africa's peace and security agenda is confronted with yet another challenge, the Ebola virus. As you know, a new outbreak of this deadly virus was reported in the Democratic Republic of the Congo on 1st of August 2018. And since then, over 3,000 people have been infected and more than 2,000 have died. Women and young people have been hit hardest. African youth may escape the bullets, but end up dying anyway. if we do not act on Ebola. And with this, we need our collective action in combating Ebola, but also by adopting a peace-focused approach to help curtail the disease's spread by mainstreaming community and political reconciliation with local cooperation, building trust and resilience as the priorities of these processes and our response. Excellencies, since my appointment by the chair of the African Union Commission with the support of the AU Youth Advisory Council, I have been humbled by what my brothers and sisters are delivering as we speak, with little to no resources, just with courage, resilience, and determination to make Africa a safe and secure environment for all. Young people did not wait for the declaration of the year on silencing the guns to act, and they did not wait for UN resolution or AU Assembly decisions to make peace possible. I would like to share just a few of these initiatives. I have undertaken a solidarity mission to South Sudan where young people like Jack, who is replacing bullets with books at the Promised Land Secondary School. People like him are on the front line of building the world's youngest state, disseminating the revitalized peace agreement on South Sudan of September 2018, which we need to continue supporting. I met with young people in Eritrea and Liberia using innovation to nurture a culture of peace. Youth groups in Kenya work in informal settlements, empowering young women using art. African Youth Action Network in Uganda trains young refugees in emotional intelligence and advocacy against hate speech using social media. A local corner in Cameroon working in 8 prisons to provide repeat offenders an alternative to re-offending, positively impacting 5,000 young people to become prisonpreneurs. Excellencies, African youth have demonstrated effect and impactful change should they be given opportunities, tools, knowledge, and capacity. And African youth also welcomed the decision of the AU member states to make the year 2020 under the theme Silencing the Guns, creating a conducive environment for development. The Youth for Peace program of the AU stems from the relevant decision of the Assembly of the African Union, especially Article 17 of African Youth Charter, which was adopted in 2006 and recognized the contribution of youth and the role of youth in peace building in Africa. So the peace and security agenda, especially on youth, has always been an African agenda, and it actually inspired many of the resolutions adopted in the esteemed council. On 6 November 2018, we had the first open session on youth, peace and security, where the Peace and Security Council called on AU member states to urgently implement UN Security Council Resolution 2250. And with particular emphasis on the development of national action plans. The Council also requested to conduct a study on youth, peace, and security, which will be presented next month. The AU also works to end harmful practices, such as the female genital mutilation and child marriage, that we believe are part of broader conversation on gender-based violence and therefore an integral part of peace and security agenda. This is why the AU Salima initiative and the UN-backed Spotlight initiative couldn't come at a better time. In Nigeria, 5 years ago, 278 girls were abducted, and thanks to youth-led campaigns like Bring Back Our Girls, made concrete action possible. But 112 girls are still missing, and it's important that the UN continues to prioritize to rescue these girls, especially because they come from a region where 2 out of 3 girls are married before their 80th birthday. On August 16 this year, I have joined forces with the African Women Leaders Network and Auline Young Women Leaders Caucus with the support of UN Women and the Office of the EU Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, organized together the first ever intergenerational retreat on women leadership in Africa, hosted by the government of Kenya. And the African Union Commission offers robust support to young women through the Auline in close partnership with the UN and civil society organizations. We will also come back to Nairobi to collaborate with His Excellency, President of Kenya, for another milestone to convene the first ever AU Youth Summit and Festival as a pre-African Union Summit meeting for youth voices to be included in decision-making processes at the African Union and to declare their position on the role of youth in silencing the guns. Many of these engagements will continue to take place, but together we can make more impact by moving from policies to implementation, because young people want action and progress, not empty promises. We may not need more and more recommendation. We may just need to deliver what we already have. And I will just offer a few concrete actions we can make. First, promoting and convening intergenerational dialogues, collaboration, and sustainable partnership with youth, which will build trust with government institution and mechanism and address youth exclusion. It is time to have young peace builders making the headlines. Second, by enhancing the capacities and leadership of youth through platforms of mentorship, internship, and leadership to facilitate their professional career development, particularly those from rural areas. And if there is one thing the UN can change, is to create more opportunities for young people in Africa by putting an end to unpaid internships in the UN. Third, by using sports, art, music, dance, storytelling, and film to mobilize the largest continental campaign on silencing the guns. These tools have proven to be effective for advocacy as an alternative peace-building approaches. 600 million youth in the continent is a huge network of diverse and innovative minds who are interconnected as well on the web. In an instant, youth can spread information, alert, and raise awareness, and their outreach and advocacy potential is unprecedented with new technologies. Fourth, by investing in civil society and civic space, providing direct financial and technical support to youth intervention and provide funds for youth-led peace-building efforts, but through really effective mechanisms that benefit and sustain their work and social impact and not harm them instead. Fifth, by translating commitments to action, we trust that the UN Security Council Resolution 2457 on silencing the guns in Africa and the subsequent mobilization of the UN system by the Secretary General through the UN Silencing the Guns Task Force will generate the required support for member states, AU and regional economic communities, and young people to successfully implement the Silencing the Guns agenda. And lastly, if there is one policy framework we still need to think through, it would be the intersection between women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas, which was highlighted by the Missing Peace Independent Progress Study on Youth, Peace and Security. The inclusion of young women and girls as partners in the Council work on conflict prevention and sustainable peace is crucial. Young women are consistently subsumed into these different categories, which renders them vulnerable to being left out. Young women and girls face double discrimination due to their sex and age, falling between youth-focused peacebuilding and prevention programs and women-targeted peacebuilding intervention. To ensure the inclusion, empowerment, and systematic engagement of young women, it is crucial to the implementation of 2250 and 1325 resolutions. Excellencies, we should not let fear drive our decisions, but more than ever, we need a leadership of courage that is not just responsive, but empowering and preventive. My generation is craving for greater political space to operate and drive desired change. My generation is ready to make an impact that may not be comprehended, but cannot be denied. My generation is ready to put behind unhealthy competition and foster collaborative partnerships within innovative and sustainable resourcing. Young Africa cannot continue to be ignored as the most youthful population in the world. Young Africa deserves a seat at the table and in decision-making positions to make peace possible. There is never a better time to act than now and make the decision for genuine youth engagement in this agenda. In 2013, my cousin, through our family, community, and local government support, started a gym project in our village because he wanted to make a difference and inspire the unemployed youth of our community to believe in themselves and to serve, because he realized his power to bring healing and mend the broken spaces of our world instead of destroying it. Despite anger and frustration, the majority of young people are choosing not to fight back, but to create alternative spaces for themselves. And that's what youth are asking you to do. We must focus on building communities, building partnerships, building trust, building dialogues, and building resilience. And to build youth trust in institutions, we need to reframe this debate so they can be perceived as part of the solution, not the problem. We need to articulate a story of hope and Africa's leadership for youth. And I can't find better than the words of South Africa's icon, Steve Biko, to end with. He said, "The great powers of the word may have done wonders in giving the world an industrial look, But the great gift still has to come from Africa, giving the world a more human face. And that face, Excellency, is young. African youth are already doing their part in peace and development, because when young people deliver, young people promise, young people deliver. And now we need you to also contribute and do your part, and let us co-lead. Thank you for your attention.
I want to thank Ms. Chebbi for her briefing.